Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. And good evening. We are continuing the talk on Raja Yoga given by Swami Abhedananda, and then we will continue with his talk on Karma Yoga. So we mentioned last time that this direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Abhedananda, who was here for many years in the United States, gave many lectures, and he's collected 4 of them that were on the 4 yogas together here in volume 3. And so we were reading, we skipped the one on Hatha Yoga since we don't really emphasize that here, and went to the one on Raja Yoga, and we've gone through the steps of pranayama and pratyahara, and now we're going on to the obstacles to samadhi. So why don't you, I might give us a little on that.
There are many obstructions to samadhi, such as grief, disease, mental laziness, doubt, cessation of the struggle to attain samadhi, heaviness of body and mind, thirst for worldly things, false knowledge, non-attaining concentration, falling away from the state once attained, irregular breathing, and so forth. They can be easily avoided by regular practice under the guidance of a yogi teacher. If a student tried to practice by himself any of the exercises as given in Raja Yoga, he may have some unpleasant experiences which may disturb his mind or nervous system. But if he has an experienced Raja Yogi to direct him, then he will have no difficulty in conquering all the obstacles and dangers and in reaching the right destination. Some of the powers generated by these practices are too dangerous to be handled by an inexperienced student. They may not only injure him, but even drive him to insanity. There have indeed been many such cases among those who have tried to practice without the help of a well-qualified guru or spiritual teacher. Having removed all obstructions in this path, the student should be confident that he is approaching the final goal of Raja Yoga. When the superconscious realization is acquired, all doubts will cease forever. All questions concerning the nature of the soul will be answered. The search after truth will stop. The mind will become tranquil, and the soul will be emancipated from the bondage of ignorance and self-delusion. The yogis will never again fall a victim to the attractions of the world or be distracted by objects of sense. The whole universe will appear to him as the playground of the divine being, and he will constantly feel that his body and mind are like instruments moving under the direction of the Almighty Will, which is manifesting through all forms. Thus, having gained spiritual strength and illumination, he will become the conqueror of himself and the master of nature even in this life. He alone has reached happiness on this earth. He alone has conquered the world, who has gained perfect control over his mind and body, whose soul rests in tranquility, and whose eyes behold divinity in everything and everything in that eternal being, which is the infinite abode of existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute.
And so that ends the chapter on Raja Yoga. And of course, Raja Yoga is the royal path, and it's actually by itself I would say, a difficult path. It's not that easy to be a Raja Yogi. In fact, if you read just the yamas and niyamas, you feel, oh my goodness, if I could do all of this, I'd already be there. It's a difficult path all by itself, but that's why we have 4 yogas. We have more ways of approaching the problem, and this idea of concentrating the mind will really come up in all of these. In Karma Yoga, we're going to look at how you use the work that you do to concentrate your mind and to purify the mind and to steady the mind and to keep the mind from wavering on different topics and worrying about different things. And in Bhakti Yoga, we learn how to use the devotion to a particular deity or a particular incarnation to focus the mind through the power of love. We all know how powerful our emotions are, and if you can guide those emotions to concentrate on a particular chosen ideal, a spiritual ideal, then concentration becomes much easier. In Jnana Yoga, concentrating on the truths of the scriptures and repeating those over and over for the kind of mind that's tuned to philosophical discussions and debates. This is a kind of sadhana that will focus the mind, and you'll find that the mind can contemplate for hours a particular great saying in the scriptures. So he's going to take up next Karma Yoga, which is a very practical yoga. It's one that, let's face it, we all have to do actions. We can't, there's a shortage of caves sitting in environments where berries and nuts and fall off the trees, and all you have to do is go out and forage for an hour and then go back to your cave. Those kinds of days are not here anymore. So we all have to do a certain amount of action, whether you're a householder or a monastic. And so Karma Yoga is a very practical yoga. So let's begin the Karma Yoga section and see what Swami Abhedananda says about this.
One of the significations of the word yoga is dexterity in work. To render this meaning still more specific, the Sanskrit term karma, derived from the root verb kri, to act, is added. Taken in its literal sense, therefore, karma signifies action and refers to all actions, whether of mind or of body. Whenever there is activity of any kind, it is karma. In this sense, devotion, love, worship, meditation, concentration, discrimination are all karma, as are also, for the same reason, eating, drinking, walking, talking, or performing any organic function. Again, every action, as we are aware, is followed by reaction. No action can be separated from its result, as no cause can be absolutely disconnected from its effect. Consequently, the secondary meaning of karma embraces all reactions or results of actions. The chain of cause and sequence, known as the law of causation, is also called karma, and every action of body and mind is governed by the law of karma, or of action and reaction. Being subject to this natural law, we've been working in this world from the beginningless past and reaping the results of our efforts, whether pleasant or unpleasant, good or evil.
All right, so here he's reminding us that all these things that we do every day are just kinds of actions, whether we're thinking, whether we're eating, drinking, walking, talking, performing any kind of function at all. That's a particular kind of action. So one way of looking at spiritual practice is to how do we spiritualize those simple everyday activities and change those into something which helps our spiritual lives. So when you're eating, you can think, I'm nourishing this temporary temple of the divine, this body that I have, that I'm inhabiting, and the Atman is inhabiting. And so it becomes a temple, just like a physical temple is. And so eating becomes an act of devotion, you could say, or yogic action, when you think that you are keeping that temple in good shape. You are taking care of the temple, just as if you were painting the exterior of the temple, or mopping the floors in the temple, or vacuuming the carpet, depending on what kind of flooring you have. Don't mop your carpets. So all of these activities, walking, exercising, again, you're taking care of this temple of the divine. If you're talking, remember that that's an action and you're communicating something. And try to remember that you're communicating thoughts of harmony and love and peace to whoever you are talking with. Try to keep the action of talking at the highest spiritual level that you can, depending on the circumstances. All right, so those are kind of peripheral ideas, but they're still ideas that come up, you could say, in the realm of karma yoga. So let's continue with what he has to say.
And furthermore, we consider that the effect of each action leaves its impression on the mind to substance, which impression becomes the seed of a fresh action of a similar nature. We understand the third meaning of the term. In this sense, the word karma includes the accumulated results of past actions, or rather the seed forms of future activities. Hence, the character of an individual, which is the aggregate result of the works of his previous life, may be called karma. The same way, the future life will be the sum total of the result of the mental and physical actions of the present life.
It's amazing, isn't it? I'm sure you've noticed this with yourself. You can get into particular habits, particular routines, and everything seems quite natural. Then perhaps some series of events comes up, and perhaps some catastrophes or major changes, like we've all had with the pandemic, where rather than having a routine of driving to work, we didn't have to drive to work. But we had to do other things that were perhaps more difficult to get done in an environment where you couldn't actually go somewhere to do something. So our routines changed, and so then we have to form new habits. But habits are extremely strong things to have, and we always want to keep in mind to forming new habits. I've just been reminded that with myself, where I've had to drop a few activities that I did regularly for a while, and how peculiar it was to have to then get back into those activities when the opportunity arose. So we have to keep in mind that habits are very, very strong impressions to our character. That's what develops your character. I remember one person that helped my parents out when they were ill, had a very good sense of habit. And he, rather than thinking, gee, what, am I supposed to do this? Should I do that? He just had a routine, and he did it, and he got it all done very quickly. So you can get a lot more done if you have a set routine and you're able to stick to it. Now, sometimes we're in situations where you can't do that. Things come up, interruptions come up all the time, and then you have to learn to be flexible. But when possible, if you can develop routines that you can just stick to, that's a very helpful thing to be able to get a lot done. All right, let's continue.
The Karma Yoga is therefore that branch of the science of yoga which discusses the three ideas conveyed by the word karma, explains the philosophy of work, describes the method by which the individual soul can extricate itself from the wheel of action and reaction, and having escaped from the irresistible law of causation, by which everyone is bound, can attain to perfect freedom, fulfill the highest purpose of life, and thus, through right action alone, reach the ultimate goal of all religions. It is the path best fitted for those who believe in no creed, who are not devotional, and who do not care to worship or pray to a personal God.
Yeah, we had I worked with the Hindu Students Organization at USC, and many years ago we had a president who was just like this. His primary focus of spiritual life was to do good and be good, do your dharma, and that was it. Wasn't interested in devotional practices, but he knew that as president of HSO, it was part of his duty to coordinate the devotional practices that the group carried out. And so he continued to do that. But even though that wasn't part of his particular personal practice. And so, and of course, there's a couple of the classic story in the Upanishads about the yogi who gets angry at a crow and burns the crow with his yogic powers, and then he goes to beg for food, and he comes to one household, and the lady asks him to wait because she's busy, and he begins to get irritated and wondering why he's being kept waiting, and she can read his mind because she's already developed certain yogic powers through her karma yogic practice of serving her sick husband. And so she calls from the room, the next room, and says, I'm not your crow. I can't remember the other thing, but anyway, I'm not like your crow. You'll just have to be a little patient. Now he's shocked at this. He doesn't realize that this simple woman could have any kind of yogic powers like reading his mind. But she explains to him that she's achieved this by doing her duties to her husband, and then to really rub it in, you could say, she sends him to the butcher. Now, the butcher class in India is not exactly your upper class, and so this humbled yogi has to go to the butcher to learn another lesson, and again he finds that the butcher has achieved a certain level of enlightenment simply by doing his duty to his family and taking care of some of his relatives that have needed care. So that's the classic example from the Upanishads of how, without any other thing other than doing your duty in the right spirit, you can achieve enlightenment. All right, let's continue here.
The Karma Yoga teaches that the cause of suffering, misery, disease, and misfortune, which overshadow our earthly life, lies in our own actions. We reap the fruit of what we ourselves have sown. These causes are within us. We should blame neither our parents nor any evil spirit for our sufferings, but should look within ourselves to discover the source thereof. This branch of yoga likewise describes the secret of work, by knowing which we can remove all causes of bondage and suffering, and enjoy freedom, peace, and happiness, both here and after death. It tells us that every action inspired by the motive of desire for results attaches the soul to these results, and consequently becomes a source of bondage. The secret of work consists in working for work's sake, and not for fruits. If this principle be applied to the actions of our daily lives, then every work done by us will help us to advance towards the perfect emancipation of the soul. Whoever performs his duties, understanding the secret of work, becomes truly unselfish, and eventually gains knowledge of his real self, which is immortal and divine.
Yes, it's with psychology, for a while it seemed like it was almost a fad to blame your parents for everything. It's my parents did this and my parents did that. It's no wonder I'm a mess. Well, you have to realize that it was your own karmic patterns that put you in that particular situation, and then you have to use your own willpower in order to develop a better character in this lifetime to get out of it. So sometimes understanding things is helpful, but blaming things is not usually very helpful. It simply is a way of us avoiding the consequences that we've created for ourselves and taking the responsibility to fix them. Because this law of cause and effect means that if you got yourself into it, you can get out of it. There was an old joke. This poor little old lady was shopping, and she was having a lot of trouble finding things, and it was already past closing time, and the clerks were getting very impatient. And so one of them finally went up to the lady, the lady went up to one of the clerks and said, "Oh, could you help me out?" And he says, "Well, certainly. Which way did you come in?" So that's part of the problem, you see, is sometimes it's helpful to know how we got into a particular situation and what our situation is, but we have to get ourselves out of it. All right, let's continue here with Karma Yoga.
According to the Karma Yoga, the true self, when it becomes identified with the limitations of the mind in the physical form, appears as ego, doer or actor, and performing work from various motives remains attached to its results. We thus feel as one with our body and endeavor to enrich the narrow, limited self, or I, by getting something from that which is not I. This imperfect knowledge of the self, or rather ignorance of the true self, is the cause of selfishness. From selfishness, in turn, proceeds all that desire for results, which forces us to live and act like slaves. Karma Yoga shows us the way by which we can become conscious of our true self, and how by widening the range of the limited ego, we can make it universal. When we've accomplished this, we shall live in the world working not from selfish motives, but for humanity, yet with as much interest in heart as we had when we worked for ourselves. Nor shall we then seek the comfort and pleasure of this little personality, which is now the chief center of our interest and efforts, but shall strive for the good of all.
All right, let's see. Is this a good time for a musical break? This might not be as relevant to some today as it was when I first gave a talk on musical spiritual spins on different music. But there's Rodgers and Hammerstein musical called Oklahoma, and its theme song was Oklahoma, where winds go sweetly down the plain or something. It's quite a nice little tune. So I wrote a little parody on that with different words about Karma Yoga. I'm going to attempt to sing it, and we'll see how many people we lose from this. Karma Yoga, with success or failure's not the game. When the work's complete, it sure is sweet to detach from either as the same. Karma Yoga every day with great attention. I focus on my work. No stray thoughts lurk in my mind. My concentration's high. And we know the plan is so grand. In detachment this fruit stands, strong we stand. And when we say Om, in Om we mean to stay. We're only saying you're doing fine. Karma Yoga's okay. Of course, OK stood for Oklahoma in the original. So that was kind of a fun song to write. But that gets across the several points about Karma Yoga. We're not worried about the success or the failure. That's not the game. But we detach ourselves from either success or failure just the same. And we focus on the work, and we don't let our minds stray. So our concentration is high. All right, so let's continue with Swami Abhedananda's version of Karma Yoga.
Anyone who wishes to become a true karma yogi should clearly understand the philosophy of work. It should remember that every action of body and mind must produce some effect which will eventually come back upon the doer, and that if there be the smallest desire for result, it will be the seed of future action of a like nature. You should also realize that every action produces similar reaction. If the action be in harmony with the moral and physical laws which govern our lives, then the reaction which comes back upon the actor will bring only that which is good: peace, rest, fortune, health, and happiness. If, on the contrary, these laws are violated, then the result will be evil, producing restlessness, discomfort, loss of fortune, disease, and unhappiness. The traveler in the path of the Karma Yoga should not even think evil of another, because in the attempt to injure others, we first injure ourselves. Every thought puts the mind substance in a certain state of vibration and opens the door to the influence of such minds as are in the same state of vibration. Therefore, when we cherish evil thoughts, we run the double risk of affecting other minds and of being influenced by all even-minded persons holding similar thoughts. Nay, we expose our minds to all the evil thoughts that have been thought in the past and stored up in the mental atmosphere of the world. A corresponding result comes from the holding of good thoughts. This is the reason why evildoers grow worse and worse every day, and the doers of good deeds become better and better.
Yes, and of course we also have to remember that we don't really understand all the intricate ins and outs of the laws of karma and all the different past karmic impressions and karmic debts that we might have. And so sometimes we get frustrated. We feel, gee, I'm doing all these good things and I keep running into obstacles and things aren't working out very well, and you get frustrated. So we have to remember that you have to be like Job in the Bible. You have to just continue to have faith that doing good will eventually have good results. And we don't often understand how things that appear as things that are like bad luck for us kind of thing actually might have good results in the future. Things that would put us in positions where we're going to learn the karmic lessons or unfold our karmic tendencies in a way that we hadn't really planned. There's a classic example in a movie called Music of the Heart. And this is about a woman whose husband left her. And she had to scramble to figure out how to make a living. And she was a violinist, so she finally landed a job as a music teacher in Harlem. That's not the easiest place to be a music teacher. So in the school district, she started a program and she started having very good success. And eventually, the students, after a time, sometimes the parents had some difficulties with her harsh tactics, but she worked through those and they became very successful. But then, through budget cuts, the program was threatened to be discontinued. But she was able to talk some famous violinists into helping her with a fundraising concert. So they went to Carnegie Hall and had this very successful fundraising concert and saved the program. And afterwards, she thanked her mother for all her support. And she says, well, don't thank me. Thank your ex-husband. And she says, my ex-husband? He says, yeah, if he hadn't divorced you, he'd never have done this. So that's an example, a classic example of when something that seemed like a really frustrating and unfortunate and unhappy experience would lead somebody down to a path of unfolding a particular karmic talent and helping a lot of kids in a depressed area with a musical program. All right, so let's continue.
The karma yogi should realize that there is one being or one spirit in the universe. Seeing the same being or spirit in all living creatures, he should recognize the rights of all and should not injure anyone, either mentally or physically. Such a yogi is truly unselfish. He is a blessing to the world and to humanity. He who wishes to practice the karma yoga should abandon attachment to the fruit of his labors and learn to work for work's sake, keeping in mind the idea that by his work he is paying off the debt which he owes to parents, society, country, and to all mankind. Like a wet nurse, he should take care of his children, realizing that they do not belong to him, but they are placed in his charge in order that he and they may gain experience and unfold their latent powers and feelings. A true karma yogi, furthermore, is he who recognizes that his real self is not a doer of action, that all mental and physical activity is merely the result of the forces of nature. Therefore, he never claims that any work, whether good or bad, has been done by his true self. He lets his mind, intellect, and sense organs work incessantly, while in his soul he holds steadfastly the idea that he is the witness-like knower of all activity, mental or physical. This way he frees himself from the law of karma and escapes from all the results of work which bind ordinary workers. Neither does he count success nor failure in his daily life. He does his best in each effort put forth by him, and after performing his duty to the utmost of his ability, if he meets with failure, he does not grieve, but saying within himself that he did all that he could under circumstances, he maintains his calmness and enjoys peace of mind even in the face of defeat.
Yeah, and you know, it's very difficult to be fair to in all circumstances, to try to be completely impartial. I used to be a school teacher, and I remember in those circumstances that everybody, all the students were different, and so you try to be fair to all of them, but to take each student from where they are and bring them forward, it requires a different approach for each one. And so sometimes it might seem like you're giving favors to one student as opposed to another to compensate for some of those differences in in the place where they're beginning. So you just do the best you can. You can't expect to be perfect. You know, in the realm of Maya, things are not going to be perfect. In the realm of Maya, there's always going to be some imperfection. And so realizing that we're working within the realm of Maya, you do the best you can and have to be detached from the results. Okay.
The aim of a karma yogi is to live in the world and act like a master, but not like a slave. Ordinary mortals implicitly obey the masters of desire and passion, following them without question or discrimination. But he who chooses the path of the karma yoga seeks absolute control over desire and passion, directs the force manifesting through the channels towards the highest ideal of life, freedom of the soul. In fulfilling all the duties of life, the karma yogi takes refuge in love, making it the sole motive power behind every action of body and mind. And whenever he performs any duty, it is always done through love. He understands that sense of duty is bondage, while work done through a feeling of love frees the soul and brings peace, rest, and in the end, everlasting happiness.
Yes, you know, this idea of acting like a master, not a slave, and that's especially true with our senses. We don't want to be slaves to our senses. Just because our sense of taste wants to eat that great big gooey and rich dessert a second time, have a second helping of that, doesn't mean we have to give in to those taste buds. We don't need to be a slave to our taste buds. We can be the master of our taste buds and realize that no, for the better taking care of this temple of the body, I'm going to not eat that second piece of lemon meringue pie or cheesecake or something of that nature. So whatever it is that the senses keep telling you that you should have, you need to be the master and decide when it's the best for you and when it's not. Because our sense organs are not necessarily programmed for our highest benefit. They might have been programmed that way 50 or 100,000 years ago when our species was developing, but they haven't kept up with the changes in the times. Our genetic programming takes longer to change than that, and our society has changed a lot very, very rapidly. So sometimes things don't work out the way they should anymore. So remember to be the master of your sense organs and not the slave. All right, let's continue.
All the great spiritual leaders of mankind, like Christ and Buddha, were the karma yogis. They worked for humanity through love and showed by their example how perfect freedom could be attained by right work. Buddha did not preach the worship of a personal God, but he established the truth that those who do not believe in a personal God and who are not devotional can reach the highest goal of all, religions, by the path of the karma yoga.
And as we'll find out as we go along, you can also do this with a belief in a personal God. It works very well to do karma yoga in combination with this, with bhakti yoga, or the belief in a personal God. So you can do it either way. Same with Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga can be practiced with the ideal of a personal God or without. So all of these yogas can be intertwined and worked together into a whole, and you can through the guidance of your spiritual teacher, you can come up with the right blend. We tend to emphasize that blend here in the Ramakrishna order, so because usually we all have at least some tendency towards all of these, even though one may be stronger in one area than the other. A good example that comes to mind of a karma yogi who had to have some power of concentration to do what he did, and devotion to a personal God. That was George Washington Carver. If you want to read an inspiring life, read the life of George Washington Carver, or visit his museum. Let's see, where was that? Tuskegee, right? Tuskegee, Alabama, is it? Where we went to see George Washington Carver's museum. And you find that overcoming tremendous odds as a black man just right after the Civil War, becoming one of the first black professors in botany and biology, and then focusing his mind on solving the problems of the poor people in the agricultural areas of the South, focusing on what the peanut could do, and developing all sorts of things for that. And he was a very deeply religious Christian man. So he was combining his deep personal belief in Christ and applying that to his work with the people of the South, the agricultural South, the workers in the fields that were having a rough time with it, and using his intellectual knowledge, focusing his mind on the powers of the peanut plant, and finding what kind of uses there would be for that. So he was using his Raja Yoga, whether he knew it or not. He was doing Raja Yoga in his focusing the mind and communing with the plants, especially the peanut plant. And he was doing Karma Yoga because he did this all as an act of service. He wasn't doing this to become rich and famous. He was doing this as an act of service to humanity. And it was part of his spiritual practice. He was serving Christ in the people that he was serving. So that was read the life of George Washington Carver. All right, let's close for the evening, and then tomorrow, that was the end of the Karma Yoga, so next week we can focus back on Bhakti Yoga. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.